You're listening to Little Atoms today with me, Neil Denny, and Becky Hogg, and we're talking to filmmaker Adam Curtis. So I mentioned at the top of the show, Adam, that there's basically three versions of the idea of the machine across the series, and the first one is that the computer's doing away with risk and stuff. Second one is nature itself, and in the third program, basically the machine is man, and you introduce the story of the idea behind the selfish gene, and about how genes are basically self-replicating machines, and we are just the carriers of it. Let's talk a little bit about the sort of background to where this idea comes from, because there's really interesting characters involved in this. I'm particularly like, if we can, talk a little bit about George Price.
No, George Price is fascinating. I mean, to be honest, I'm a journalist, and I start making films because I find what I think is a really good story. And the story of George Price, who is one of the two men, the other is a British scientist called Bill Hamilton, who really come up with the theory that lies behind what Richard Dawkins then later popularised in the 1970s as the selfish gene. They've been hidden behind his rhetoric, and that's not his fault. It's the power of the way he describes it. But they are completely fascinating characters. Price especially. Price is an American who actually comes out of the computer industry. He works in the computer industry in America in the 50s, and also is one of these arch rationalists, super rationalists. Everything. I mean, his daughter actually described it, she didn't say it in an interview, but she described it to me, privately, he was a bit like a machine himself. Everything would be analysed rationally. And together, he and Hamilton proposed the solution to the great problem that evolutionary theory had always had, which is why are if everything is a struggle for existence between competing codes buried within us, why are some people nice to each other? It's this enormous puzzle, and they mathematically propose that actually there is a game of strategy going on there. I mean, I'm not going to go into a great explanation of the selfish gene theory, but they really come up with that. What's fascinating about Price is that Price, the arch rationalist, the machine himself, faced with the fact that not only does this say this means being good is actually just a mathematical code telling you as a machine to do it, but actually being bad is also the same. In fact, everything might be just a coded instruction from the thing within you, reacts in a very, very strange way. I don't want to give too much away, but it leads him to try and demonstrate through his own life that in his own theory is wrong, and challenge it. And it leads to absolutely tragic consequences. It's a sort of, I mean, it's a story that had been lurking around in my brain for a long time, and I've always wanted to tell. And I do it, but it's also, I'm trying to show in that, is not just tell the story of how we come to see ourselves as a machine. I think it's quite a limiting idea. And what I argue in the film is that we have become attracted to it at the very time in which we've retreated from the idea of being able to change the world and make it how we want it to be. We find it intractable, so we turn to this rather fatalistic idea, which is, oh, we're just we're just machines, as Richard Dawkins says, whose job is simply to carry those codes through. Why I find Price interesting is that I think he's one of the great heroic figures of our time. He tries to fight against it, but the mood's against him.
Now, well, before I start this, I'll preface this by saying, I personally think this third film in this series is fantastic. I think it's one of the best things you've ever done. I was virtually moved to tears by it. It's so powerful. You parallel that story of Price and the selfish gene with basically the depredations of white Europeans across the continent of Africa. Why that parallel, do you think? Why do those two things?
Can I just say, I'm terribly pleased you like that film, because it's the most experimental film I've yet made. I deliberately did it as an experimental film where I take two stories. I mean, it starts at one point with one of the scientists, Bill Hamilton, in a jungle in the Congo in the year 2000. I won't explain why. You'll find out if you watch the film. And then go off down the story of Hamilton and Price and the selfish gene and our relationship with the Congo/Rwanda over the past 100 years. It's extremely experimental. I jump around in narratives. I think it works, but it's like I've really pushed it. So I am really pleased you liked it.